Understanding how a value can be represented in different forms comes from understanding relationships in math. This simply means you essentially understand the why when converting between fractions and decimals, or perhaps another number, or even words. Let's take, for example, this model on the left. I can see that if I count it out, that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections that are shaded. I can also see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections that are not shaded. So if I represent this in words, I would simply say that 4 out of 8 are shaded. I can also represent this as a fraction. 4 out of 8 are shaded. I may have also noticed that 4 is half of 8. I could even say, well, it looks like that half of it is shaded and half of it is not shaded. That's simple enough, right, when you represent the model in the form of words? Well, let's go on to prove why the original ratio that we wrote down, 4 out of 8, is actually the same as 1/2. You may have been told to simplify a fraction or even reduce it, so let's explore that. Over on the right, I have some circles. I'm going to use that to illustrate what I would like you to see. So our first circle that we had, it was divided into 8 parts. So I divided the circle into 8 parts, and 4 out of 8 of those parts were actually shaded in. So I'm going to go ahead and shade that in as well. So you can see that half is a little better represented in this form than the original model. But I'm going to go ahead and write down that I have 4 out of 8 shaded. I'm going to go ahead and identify this on the left, that the 4 represents the part and that the 8 represents the whole. And I'm doing this in color coding so you can see patterns more easily. So if I were to take the next circle and cut it into 6, what would that look like? What if I did the same thing with the next circle, cutting it into 4, and the last circle, cutting it into 2 pieces? How do I color each one of these 3 circles so that it's equivalent to the original 4 out of 8? Well, that should be easy enough to see in this model. If I color in the first one, I can color in 3. And then my part is represented as 3, and my whole is represented as 6. Let's do the next circle. In this case, how many sections would I need to color in to represent the equivalent model on the right? As you can see, I needed to color in 2. Do you notice a pattern emerging here? Have you noticed that the numerator is exactly half of the denominator? Do you recall that we said originally that 4 was half of 8? Let's go ahead and complete the last circle. What are some patterns that you see between the drawings and your part and whole, or your fractions that we created in each scenario? Sometimes you may be asked to identify a decimal form of a fraction. If you don't happen to already have that memorized, you can simply divide to find that number. Let's start by looking at our original ratio, which was 4 out of 8. 4 out of 8 is not actually just a fraction. We can look at that line as an operation. It simply means to divide. So that means 4 out of 8 also means 4 divided into 8 groups. So let's actually do that. I'm going to keep the continuations of my color patterns so that you can continue to see those relationships. We can see in this example that our decimal in this case is going to be 5/10. Will that hold true if I find the decimal for 1/2? Let's find out. Notice that regardless of whether or not we divided to find the decimal for 1/2 or 4/8, the resulting decimal is the same in either case. In fact, everything on our page is equivalent, from the fractions to the decimals to the models, and even our words to express the model are equivalent. Now back over to the left, let's go ahead and find our final representation of our fraction in decimal. The decimal we just wrote down, you can write that in either representation with a leading 0 or without. Both are acceptable. Lastly, when identifying the fraction of the original model, 4 out of 8 is correct, but its simplest form, you would just simply write it as 1/2. So now when you're asked to simplify a number or convert it, you have a little more context to draw on.